Namaste. Today I'm going to speak on freedom. I would say spiritual freedom. The reason being, the subject which I speak about is concerned with the subject of spiritualism. So, what exactly do we mean by spiritual freedom? I'd like to share my thoughts with you. So let's start. Life wants us to be free in order to discover ourselves, the two selves that we have, the thinking self and the true self, the conscious self, the soulful self, the pure consciousness. And the thinking self is that ego consciousness. And in the process of life, unlike the plants and animals who have very limited freedom, we have been bestowed upon by life limitless, infinite intelligence in the true self, the superconscious section of the mind, where there are no thoughts, which the Western world consider it as the unconscious mind. So the conscious mind, the subconscious and the conscious mind is that material mind. Is a material mind which functions only in duality, in relative opposites of this and that, divine and the devil, good and the bad, positive and the negative. For the mind to function, it has to relate to its opposite in order for it to choose, which only human beings have been granted to such an extent. To choose, the power of choice for its self-preservation, in self-interest, for its selfishness. Now, unfortunately, this limits the mind because it separates the wholesome of the absoluteness which is contained in the soul, the totality, the absolute energy is separated into its me, mine and myself. And the same power of choice which gives us tremendous material benefits from digitalization, technology, to comforts, to whatnot, using the intelligence and the intellect, it is limited because the power of choice makes us analyze, makes us evaluate, makes it slow. We keep on thinking for its benefits, for its profits, material profits, rather than in its wholesomeness. It separates me and you, the material life. So, the mind in its dual operation, it's trapped in identification and attachments. And that is why the sages in India, some over 5,000 years back, where the subject of spiritualism originated, they divided knowledge into two sections. The low knowledge concerned with material knowledge, and the higher knowledge was connected to the spiritual knowledge, the knowledge of the self, which is simply pure waves of energy in the form of divine intelligence, which now quantum mechanics theory agrees Quantum physics agrees that body and mind, which belongs to us, which is the quantum of us, which is what we are and not who we are, is simply an optical illusion. We are empty space and electromagnetic energy, waves of electromagnetic energy produced by chemical activity or chemical energy. And we get limited by this mind in its spiritual functions, not in its material functions. Material functions is purely for the benefit of the me, mine and self. So this power of choice, why does it limit us? This power of choice is also the base of conflict. It creates conflict between me and you. Because when I'm choosing everything personally for my me and mine, in selfishness and self-interest, for my exclusive self-preservation, I am separating myself away from you. So, it creates conflict. It is the source of conflict. And it's for this reason, because of separating from the oneness, togetherness, wholesomeness, where love becomes personal. The universal love. Love is a flow of energy. It just flows in its giving. It does not demand. But when we get attached to our love, we expect, we become possessive. Love which is supposed to be supreme, which is supposed to be love is God, becomes a source of conflict once attachment arises. So it's the identification and attachments which limits the mind, purely because of this reason. So, how do we normally exercise our freedom? So like I said, mind is devoid of absolute freedom. It cannot. As long as mind functions in dual living, it cannot. Whatsoever the gurus or the motivational speakers may say, it cannot. And neither can we remove the desires and emotions from the mind, because it's not possible. The desire to live is there. The problem lies not in the desires to be desireless, but it lies in the attachment towards those desires. Once you're not attached to those desires, for your me and mine, desires is purely a flow of energy. Without desire, there is no mind. It is the fuel for the mind. It can't function without desire. So how can one be desireless? So the gurus may say anything, but they also are bound by the material knowledge. Because when the subject of spiritualism originated, it was only meant for the kings and princes, the higher strata of the society. For the masses, it was very difficult for the sages to explain the spiritual aspects and the supernatural aspects which spirituality gives to you or gives to life. I remember an example, a story from the Bhagavad Gita, where Ekalavya, a lower caste person, goes to a very high known guru, Dronacharya, who was the guru of Arjuna, and requests him to teach him archery. Dronacharya refuses, saying, "No, you are of a lower caste. It's not possible for me to teach you. My teachings are only meant for the higher caste." So this is how the caste system arose. And of course, Eklavya proves later as to how he can also achieve the mastery which not only Arjun had, but he could even surpass that. If there is determination and dedication and devotion. So what I'm trying to tell you is, the gurus are limited purely to motivation, purely to cure your depression, your anxiety, your problems, your demands, your desires, giving you answers and methods how to do it. They simply do not go into the subject of the spirit, which is simply waves of energy. Waves of energy. How to go beyond the body and the mind. They restrict themselves to body and the mind. So, how do we exercise this freedom in our living in body and mind? Forget about the spirit or the soul. Even though we say body, mind and soul, we just simply are concerned with the body and mind. Nobody wants to know the self, which is purely waves of energy, electromagnetic energy produced by chemical energy or chemical activity in the body and mind, and as agreed today by quantum mechanics or quantum physics and science, that we are simply waves of energy and the body and mind is an optical illusion. Optical illusion. So how? In the body and mind, absolute freedom, what I'm trying to convey, is not possible. In totality, it is not possible. We have to live in collective consciousness, restricted by rules and regulations laid down by the government, by the judiciary, by the society, in order to sustain a certain law and order in the midst of people that we live in order to discipline, regulate a certain level of responsibility and accountability in our mind. Of course, many of us have apprehensions on the excessive rules laid down by the leaders of any community, country, and so on. But whatever said and done, our freedom is limited, and I think in the material world, one cannot have absolute freedom. We can't even think of absolute freedom, and there would be chaos if we have absolute freedom in the material world that we live in. 98% of us are living in a material world, concerned purely about ourselves and our family and our friends. That's about all. So, externally, we have no freedom. But what about our inner self? Again, we are not concerned about our interiority. We are not concerned about the random, reckless flow of the thoughts disturbing us, making us anxious, making us depressed. Most of us are making us negative. With jealousy, greed, lust, contempt, what not. 80% of the mind is negative. So we are not concerned with the inner self. The inner self is, we have this, the human beings have this power to look inwards into our own thoughts, into our own feelings, into our own beliefs, into our own emotions. We can observe it. Because the true self is nothing but the observer, the witnesser, witnessing through mind on the witnessed the object, whatever the object or the objective may be. So, We are not observing our likes and our dislikes, whether it is in a favorable pattern or an unfavorable pattern, whether it's in the act of divinity or it's in the act of being devil, even though the true self keeps on checking and warning us from inside when we observe our thoughts. So, spiritual freedom. So, spiritual freedom is all about viewing our own mind through our true self into that thinking self as an observer. Spiritual freedom is acquired as and when and the amount we can liberate our mind, liberate ourselves from the mind, liberate our true self, meaning awaken our true self to watch constantly every single thought, feeling, belief, emotion, action, and see to it that it is in check. It is in check. It does not go astray like it always does, clinging to this and that of what we like, accumulating all the time, attaching, clinging. That's what we do. So, spiritual freedom is acquired through liberation. It's called moksha. It is called moksha by the Hindu sages. Moksha, liberation. Freedom from the analytical, evaluating, selfish mind, which takes you towards togetherness, which takes you towards oneness, which takes you towards sharing. Of course, you have to balance the material with the spiritual, but not excessively, to the extent that it is 98 to 99% material and 1% spiritual. That's why the whole world is imbalanced. There's so much of chaos and anxiety and discrimination and depression and whatnot, despondency and I don't know what not is there. Nobody seems to be overall happy. Happiness just comes in fleeting moments, followed with its shadow called sadness. So please remember, for the spiritual freedom, you need to know your mind and know yourself. Know that the mind is activated only after the soul is awakened. And to awaken the soul, we have to become, or we are that observer. The sages refer to that as Sakshi. We are that observer, but we do not. It's lying dormant within our mind. We need to awaken that and constantly watch our thoughts, constantly watch our thinking self and our physical self, so that our inner self becomes stronger to handle the external. We are only concerned with the external, of what we can gain from the external, of what we can extract from the external. So, the Sakshi, the witnesser, the observer, is who we are, observing through mind on what is being observed as the object. So the subject is the witness in waves of energy, the intelligence, the divine intelligence, which the mind agreed cannot capture in totality, but it can capture a lot. And how does it capture? Spontaneously, in awareness, not not otherwise, in spontaneity, in thoughtless thoughts, in silence, when you're observing, without thinking, free from the mind, you're just observing, purely observing your own thoughts. You are in freedom. For that fleeting moment, you are liberated from the mind. So please try to gain as much of spiritual freedom as possible. Thank you for listening. Namaste.